Business Spotlight, brought to you by Cross Rhythms and Baba Baboon.
I'm Sonya and this is Business Spotlight in partnership with Cross Rhythm City Radio and Baba Baboon. This week we're turning our attentions to the environment, to sustainability and what this means to a business as we welcome Jack Holmes, who is Energy Assessor from Groundwork West Midlands. Hello Jack, how are you?
Hi Sonya, you okay?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us here in the studio for Business Spotlight. Now, Groundwork, do you just want to explain what exactly is Groundwork? And what do you do in our local community?
I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. Groundwork is a federation of trusts, which is a charity that operates across the entire country. And our particular trust is Groundwork West Midlands, where we have multiple projects going on. We have our land management team, where we work on country parks in the area, for example, Silverdale Country Park. We have our Green Doctor project, which is our fuel poverty focused project, where we go out to people and go into their homes and help them with energy bill worries and rising costs, all that sort of stuff, any sort of debt issues that they have as well. And then we have our Sustainable Ventures project, which is business focused, helping them with their carbon footprint, carbon emissions, and their sustainability as well through energy efficiency.
So, in looking at a business then, towards businesses, why should businesses, I know it's a topic of many conversations now, being sort of, looking after your carbon footprint and being more environmental or eco-savvy, etc. But from your point of view, from Groundwork's point of view, why should a business be taking sustainability serious now?
Well, for our point of view in particular for Groundwork, if we bring it back to us, as a charity that works online, works in the community and focuses on helping the people around us and people in the environment as well, we need to be sustainable ourselves, just as everybody else is trying to do their own bit. And as that relates back to business, there's multiple sort of regulations and targets and wider scope sort of things that they want to fit in. But ultimately, it comes down to being sustainable for themselves. So keeping them more financially stable, making sure that they're having as good an impact on the environment around them as possible. Being green, which is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but keep making sure that they're doing the best for the climate as they can as well.
And what do they, need to be aware of? You've mentioned a few things there about being green. And I know this could probably go on and on and on about what green actually means, but do you want to just give a few examples of what that does mean for an organisation?
So in effect and practically, being green means making sure that you're being as efficient as possible with the energy that they consume, with the mileage that's done for business vehicle fleets, for example, the amount of waste that's created, and making sure that all of that is done in an efficient as way as possible. So that's through assessing what you're currently doing and setting targets for the future to meet as well. And that all comes back to, if you're being as efficient as possible with the material side of things, you're being as efficient as possible financially as well, which is the other side of sustainability, is the financial sustainability for businesses.
So does that go into things like, even insulation in buildings? Does it go into the lighting? Do you mean all those aspects?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about reducing the amount of energy that you use as possible. So installing things like LED light bulbs, installing things like occupancy sensors for those light bulbs as well. But it's also making sure that the fabric of the building is losing as little heat as possible for what you are creating in the winter. A lot of businesses will have electric heating, which is quite expensive compared to gas, for example. There's a lot of old buildings, especially in Stoke, a lot of old solid brick buildings or system built buildings that were done in the sort of 60s, 70s, that can be very cold in the winter if they're not heated properly. So insulating those buildings is kind of the first step in the kind of pyramid of sustainable actions that you can take to make as big an impact as possible.
And a business then, or any organisation out there, whether it's a charity or a business as such, if they are looking to make changes to transition into be more sort of environmentally sort of aware for the future, would it be quite expensive to actually implement changes, or does it actually offset with, in the long run?
Well, it can be quite expensive. It can be quite an upfront cost. But part of assessing your own situation is knowing what's feasible for you as well, and identifying which implementations will have the shortest payback period is what it's referred to as, which is basically the cost it takes to install versus the amount of money saved over a period of time. The lower that period of time, the quicker you get your payback, and then you can in effect start making profit from your implementation compared to if you didn't do that implementation at all. So yeah, you are right, and a lot of businesses and a lot of charities will look towards grants and funds for the larger sort of stuff, you know, if it's a big solar panel array or if it's loads of insulation, replacing loads of single glazed windows, for example, much larger scale things, but also smaller scale things as well. So some businesses just need a bit of a bump and a bit of a help to break that barrier to help them to start their sort of sustainable journey.
And through Groundwork yourselves, if somebody, you know, is out there listening and it is on their mind, it's on their radar to make some changes, but they don't know where to go, they don't know how to even start or what to look at first. Yeah. What would you say to those?
They can come to us. Mm-hmm. That would be the first sort of step, I'd say, because that's exactly what we do. We help businesses and charities through the Sustainable Ventures Project to be able to assess their current energy consumption, assess their buildings, assess their travel, all the sorts of facets of carbon emissions and business costs, to create a plan, a carbon reduction plan first and foremost, which will outline and detail all the sort of steps that they can take, and we'll do it in a way that sets the quickest payback periods to the longest payback periods as well. So they have a solid plan for the future, and they know exactly sort of where their money is going to end up.
And is this an audit then you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. It's an on-site energy assessment generally. Mm-hmm. It can be desk-based as well if businesses don't necessarily have premises that they use consistently, if they're more sort of home-based or they travel a lot or they use other places to hot desk at as well. So this, regardless of sort of business size, anything like that, it's creating and analysing what position you're at, and then you can have an associated plan with it as well. Can
I just go back to something you mentioned there, is if the hot desking. Can you just explain a bit more about what you mean from that side of things?
So basically, a lot of sort of businesses will have people who go around and hot desk go into sort of shared workspaces and buildings like that, but that all still has an associated cost and carbon emission to it as well.
Travel,
the actual use of the space that you're in as well, that can all be part of it. So knowing what the numbers look like, knowing why you might be doing these things, why you might be able to do it slightly differently, that's all part of it.
And that's Sustainable Ventures, the audit that you do. Is that free to businesses? Is it totally
completely free? Yeah, completely fully funded by Stoke City Council as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Easy for me to say. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's all completely fully funded. And to go back to the sort of barrier break-in things that we were talking about in terms of like LED lighting installations, occupancy sensors, those more low-cost things, we do have our own small grant pot available for that as well, for businesses and charities up to about £500. And we issue those following an energy assessment. If we identify something that's in that sort of cost range that would have a significant enough impact, then we will fund that change.
And you mentioned when we first started to chat as well, Jack, that Groundwork, you do a lot in like country parks.
Yep.
You mentioned Silverdale Country Park.
Yep.
Now, obviously, that's in the outdoors. Do you do anything like, say, an organisation's got quite a bit of land to them? Do you do things like that where you can go in and assess whether it's their grounds, the outside, whether it's putting in different aspects into gardens, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of another part of what we can do through our overall sustainable business service, where we can do nature and biodiversity checks with organizations. So that can be part of if they're planning a project on a site, like creating a community garden, how can they do that in the most sustainable way possible? What are they procuring? What tools are they using? Are they having to use petrol tools, or what are they having to hire? Are they doing concrete, or could they do something else? All that sort of thing is all part of it. And like, for example, Groundwork, we have our country parks across the West Midlands. We ourselves look at those sorts of things as well. Are we procuring the right things? Are our projects actually going to have a significant enough impact on the nature and biodiversity of that area? Are they going to be more friendly for people to use and more friendly for the wildlife in that area as well?
And is it sort of, have you seen or are you noticing that more organisations, as well as looking at the inside of buildings, like you say, whether it's lighting or insulation, are more and more organisations looking to do more things sort of in the outdoors as well?
I think it's a tricky question, because I think if they have the means to, and they have the kind of desire as part of their business setup to do those sort of things, then definitely they do want to do it, and they want to do it in as sort of sustainable way as possible. But I think a lot of the businesses are in and around Stoke-on-Trent in particular, because the green spaces are kind of seen as outside of the city, outside of the way the businesses generally operate. It can be a little bit of more of a challenge for them. There's a bit more of a barrier for them to realise, maybe we could do something out here, or maybe we could support some other project on this green space in this way. So that can all be part of that assessment, that overall assessment for an organisation. Yeah,
okay. And just another question, just directly for, at Groundwork, I suppose. We talk about, and I've mentioned, you hear so many different things about being sustainable and various different things that you can do, like we're chatting about now. But what do you find now with businesses? Are businesses becoming more and more open to listening and to learning, or is there still sort of a stigma or a barrier there where it's just still a bit of a grey sort of dark area?
I mean, I think it's kind of one of two ways, really. It's the business is either aware of it and open to it, but they may not have the time or the money to really action on it, and they just kind of have to keep ticking along, because that's part of the struggle and part of the reason why the project is going on in Stoke at the moment. Is businesses and the business sustainability in the area is very low. The amount of turnover rate on the high street is constant. There's constantly businesses closing, reopening, closing again. The amount of boarded up shops, etc. Everybody can see it. That's part of the reason that business sustainability is very low. So for a lot of businesses, it's a finance first thing, and then it's more of the environmental side of things afterwards. But they're intertwined completely, really. If you're lowering the amount of electricity you're consuming, you're lowering your bills, and you're lowering the amount of carbon emissions associated with that consumption. So it's a matter of messaging generally. But I would say most businesses are aware and willing and know what the results will be. But the financial aspect is generally going to be up there as well.
And just going back, we've touched on this as well a bit. You mentioned the high street there. Does it matter what type of business that, even Groundwork can support? You're a charity that you can go in and support, whether it's with the sustainable ventures, with the free energy audit. Does it matter what size or what type of business?
No, absolutely not. The only thing that impacts on size is the sort of regulation around how much they need to report nationally into the government. Really big businesses obviously need to have full net zero pathways in place, and they need to report to the government each year. Smaller businesses don't necessarily have that same requirement. But the methodology and the approach for any and every business is the same. You look at what you're doing right now, and then you analyze each part individually, and you create a plan and a target to make those as sustainable as possible.
And do you see any sort of, one last thing to ask, do you see anything for the future or anything you'd like to see from your own perspective, whether that's personal or, for going forward?
I think for the future in general, making sure that businesses are engaged with sustainability is as much on projects like ours, and is as much on sort of local councils and local governments to kind of really encourage businesses and give them the incentives to be part of the sustainable switch, really. Because ultimately, if people don't feel engaged, and this is the same across communities as well, if people don't feel listened to, don't feel engaged, don't feel like their worries are met first and foremost, then they're not really going to engage with much more than with anything else. So that's the sort of main things I'd like to see for the future, really, is to make sure that engagement is right up there, and is at the front of people's minds.
Definitely. And Jack, if anybody is listening and they'd like to know more, whether it's about Groundwork or getting involved and know more about all the projects that you do, not just with businesses but other charities and also local communities, and also obviously Sustainable Ventures, which is the free energy audit that we've mentioned. How is it best to find you and contact you?
So best place to find me is to just email me directly, which is jack.holmes@groundwork.org.uk. You can also give me a call directly as well, which is 07970 725 439. And our general sustainable business inbox as well, which is sbswestmidlands@groundwork.org.uk.
And website?
We do have a website as well, groundworksbs.co.uk or .org.uk. But that is our general national site. So on there, you'll see everything that we do across the UK as well. All sorts of case studies and great work that all of our other trusts do across the UK as well.
Brilliant. Jack, thank you so much for joining us
No
here.
worries, thank you very much.
On Business Spotlight. That's Jack Holmes, Energy Assessor from Groundwork West Midlands, here on Business Spotlight with me, Sonya Farrell.
Business Spotlight, shining a light on our local business community. Brought to you by Cross Rhythms and Baba Baboon.